He smirked like he was proud of it. We could hire 3 junior engineers for what we pay you. That's what he said. And just like that, 18 years gone. Not a thank you. Not even a real goodbye. Just numbers on a spreadsheet. My name is Victor Hale. I'm 55. Or I was. Back then, lead systems engineer at Veltria Housing Well. What used to be Veltria. I'd spent nearly 2 decades as the signing, building, and babysitting every line of code that kept their operations running like clockwork. I didn't just work there. I was the system. And now I was just cost. Across the conference table sat Graham Vickers' shiny suit, designer glasses, a polished MBA from Cornell, new CTO, been with the company for 6 months, maybe less. The kind of man who talks fast and listens slow. The kind of man brought in when someone upstairs wants to modernize. You know what that really means, gut the place. Cut corners. And call it innovation. To his right sat Diane from HR, avoiding my eyes like she was watching someone get executed. Your severance is generous, she said, sliding a folder across the glossy table. 2 months' salary. Accrued vacation time. We appreciate everything you've done. Appreciate. That word, the way they used it like a consolation prize. I took the folder, nodded, said, "Is that all you have to say?" Graham tilted his head, eyebrows raised, like he expected me to throw a fit. Maybe he wanted a story to tell the board. Victor didn't take it well. Maybe he'd already rehearsed it. But I wasn't going to give him that. "What would you like me to say?" I asked. Calm. Too calm. Seems pretty straightforward to me. I could feel them glance at each other. Confused. Because here's the thing, they thought I was calm. I wasn't. I was just done. There's a difference. We'd appreciate your help during the transition. Graham continued. The new team could use some guidance on the architecture. Maybe a short-term consulting role. I nodded again. I'll think about it. But I already knew my answer. They thought I'd be bitter. They thought I'd beg. What they didn't think was that I'd walk away. I packed 18 years of loyalty into one cardboard box. My nameplate. Some coffee mugs. A tangle of old Ethernet cables. I walked out without a scene. Colleagues avoided my eyes. Some looked guilty. Others just scared, wondering if they were next. In the parking garage, my phone buzzed. A message from Alan, our DBA. "This is Vic. The whole team's freaking out." I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned off my phone. Back home, I sat on the back deck, a bourbon in hand, watching the copper light of the setting sun spill across Lake Ontario. Elaine, my wife, joined me. She didn't ask anything at first. Just sat with me. Then, softly, "What will you do now?" I shrugged. "Something'll come along." What Graham never asked, what he never even tried to learn, was this. I didn't just build Veltria's system. I was the system, the logic, the redundancies, the undocumented layers. Only I knew how it all held together. And I wasn't planning to explain it to anyone. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You don't always need to fight to prove your worth. Just let the silence speak. And if stories like this stir something in you, stick around. At Voices Stories. We believe the quiet ones often carry the loudest truths. Long before it became Veltria Housing. Before the corporate takeovers and sleek new logos. The company was just Bayview Properties. A modest firm run by Harold Bay. A man who believed more in gut instinct than market trends. Back then, they managed 4 apartment complexes, had 12 employees, and operated out of a cramped office above a dry cleaner in Rochester. That's where I came in. At the time, I was bouncing between consulting gigs, helping small firms wrangle their IT messes into something functional. I never stayed long. Most of those companies didn't want real solutions, they wanted band-aids. Quick fixes. Harold was different. "I don't want temporary." He told me during our first conversation, "We're expanding. I need something solid. I need someone who can build from the ground up. That was all I needed to hear. There wasn't much to start with: 2 desktop computers, a fax machine, and a dial-up line that dropped every time someone picked up the phone. But I saw potential, not in the hardware, but in Harold. He gave me space, support, and the trust most companies only pretend to offer. That kind of trust makes you want to build something that lasts. And so I did. Over the next few years, I designed and built a unified property management system from scratch. Tenant records, maintenance scheduling, rent processing, background checks piece by piece, line by line. I wove it together. We moved from folders to forms, from whiteboards to workflows. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. And it scaled. As Bayview grew, so did the system. When they opened their 10th property, I restructured the database. When they crossed state lines, I built in compliance logic. Every need they had, I anticipated. Every problem, I engineered around. Harold never micromanaged. He asked smart questions and left me alone to answer them with code. By the time I hit my 10th year with the company, we'd expanded to 4 states, managing over 60 properties. What had once been a local office was now a regional player. And my little system, it had become the heart of it all. When Harold retired 5 years ago, I remember he called me into his office, same desk, same coffee-stained carpet, and said, "You built something people can't see, but that they rely on every day. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Then his son sold the company, and everything started to shift. The shift wasn't sudden. That's the thing about being pushed out. You don't notice the first few shoves. They come dressed as meetings you're no longer invited to, as decisions made without your input. At first, you chalk it up to oversight, a scheduling glitch, miscommunication. But eventually, it becomes a pattern. It started small. I submitted a proposal for a documentation team, just 3 people. Their entire job would be to catalog the inner workings of the systems I had built over the past 15 years. I made the case clearly: if we ever wanted the infrastructure to survive beyond me, we needed real documentation. They said no. Too expensive. Maybe next quarter. That quarter never came. Then came the consultants. Young, eager, freshly minted from business schools. They sat in meetings with laptops they barely looked up from, nodding through my architectural briefings like they were enduring a lecture. They had no intention of applying. They used buzzwords like disruption and agility, then recommended box software that couldn't plug into even the shallowest layer of our custom-built system. I tried. I really did. I showed them the logic trees, the conditional failsafes, the reasons behind every unorthodox decision, but I could tell it wasn't about understanding. It was about replacing. Eventually, the invites to those meetings stopped coming. Elaine noticed it before I did. We were having dinner, roast chicken and wine. A quiet Tuesday night. She was refilling my glass when she said it. Casually, but not carelessly. "They're easing you out." "You know," I laughed. "They need me. No one else can make sense of how this thing fits together." She didn't laugh. "Maybe that's exactly the problem." I didn't answer. 6 months before my termination, they hired him, Graham Vickers, a software guy from the banking sector, the kind who measured success by metrics and efficiencies. He spoke fluently in modernization and streamlining. Within weeks, he'd hired 3 junior engineers, straight out of college. He said they were bright and hungry. They started shadowing me, taking notes, asking questions. I answered everyone. I didn't hide anything, but I saw it in their eyes: confusion, sometimes frustration. They were smart. Yes, but this system wasn't built from textbooks. It was born from real-world mess and adapted to real-world need. It had grown like a tree, roots tangled, branches layered over time. They were looking for blueprints. What they got was a forest. 1 week before the axe fell, Graham poked his head into my office. "Quick check-in tomorrow morning. Just a quarterly alignment." I nodded. still staring at my screen. I should have known. I wore a navy button-down that morning. No tie. Just another Tuesday. The air was crisp. Early fall. Leaves starting to scatter across the parking lot. I remember thinking I should get new wipers for the truck. Funny. The kind of thoughts you have before your world quietly shifts. I walked into that quick check-in meeting 5 minutes early. Graham was already seated. Diane, too. They both looked up as I entered, but neither smiled. Thanks for coming. Victor, Graham said, tone overly formal. Diane pushed a folder toward me, and that's when I knew. No preamble, no pretense. Just a thin manila folder between us, and a line rehearsed in some legal department somewhere. As part of our strategic restructuring, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. I didn't flinch. I'd been preparing for this moment in some distant part of my brain for months, even if I never admitted it. Nothing personal, Graham added, almost sheepishly. It's just cost-cutting. I looked at him. That's what it came down to. Then. Not legacy, not reliability, not 2 decades of dedication. Just cost. I opened the folder. 2-month severance. Accrued vacation. Legal verbiage about confidentiality and property rights. Standard stuff. Diane said I could take some time to process. That I didn't have to decide anything today. I closed the folder. Thank you, I said. That caught them off guard. Graham cleared his throat. We'd appreciate your help during the transition. If you're willing, maybe a consulting contract. A few weeks to help the new team get up to speed. I nodded. I'll think about it. But I wouldn't. We both knew that. We shook hands. Cold. Dry fingers on both sides. I returned to my office and looked around. My space. My chair. The small plant Elaine had given me 3 years ago. It was still alive. Somehow, I packed methodically. A cardboard box. A few framed photos. Books. Backup drives that were already company property. Every piece of my professional life fit in that box. 18 years collapsed into 30 minutes. I paused before turning off my monitor one last time. For a brief second, I wondered if I should write something down. A guide. A note. A warning. I didn't. The people who needed to listen had already chosen not to. As I walked down the hallway, a few people peeked out from cubicles. Some nodded. Most avoided eye contact. I didn't blame them. Fear travels fast in offices. In the parking garage, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan. This is Vic. The whole team's freaking out. They just told us. I stared at the screen, then powered the phone off. Later that night, I sat on our back deck again. The same lake, same bourbon. Only the silence was different. Elaine joined me quietly. So, it's done, she asked. Yeah, I said, barely above a whisper. What now? I took a slow sip. I'll figure it out. What I didn't have to say was this. They didn't fire me because I failed. They fired me because I was the last person who still knew how everything really worked. The first message came 2 weeks after I left. I was in my home office, polishing my resume, adjusting words that had once felt solid, and now just felt exposed. I'd written architected enterprise systems across multi-state infrastructure. But even that felt small, next to 18 years of sweat. The phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Graham. Victor. It's Graham. We're having some minor issues with the tenant portal. The junior team is looking into it. But they're struggling a bit with some of the architecture. Nothing urgent. Just hoping you could walk us through a few things. Quick call. Shouldn't take long. I deleted the message. 15 minutes later. Another voicemail. Then another. By the end of the day, 3 calls. All from Graham. Each one sounding a little more anxious than the last. And then a text from Alan. System's been down all day. Maintenance requests not processing. Graham's losing his mind. I placed my phone face down on the table and went back to rewriting my job history. The next morning, Diane from HR called. This time, her voice had softened. Victor, I hope you're doing well. We'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement. Just temporary. To help with some current system issues, the compensation would be quite generous. I picked up the phone for the first time. How generous, I asked. $300 an hour. Minimum 4-hour engagement. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. I didn't think about it. I went to the kitchen. Elaine was making coffee. She placed a mug in front of me, and I stared out the window toward the water. What are you thinking? She asked. I took a sip. Let the heat sit on my tongue. I'm thinking, they're starting to find out what I was worth. Over the next 3 days, the calls kept coming. From Graham, from Diane, even from Justin Bayview, Harold's son. Now, a board member. Voices that once overlooked me now pleading for my expertise. The tenant portal was down. The maintenance scheduler was spitting out errors. Auto payments weren't running. Thousands of residents were affected. Still, I didn't answer. Because sometimes, silence isn't cruelty. Sometimes, it's the only thing they'll listen to. There's a moment when you realize your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could. At Voices Stories, we keep these moments alive not to judge, but to witness. If that silence made you feel something, you're not alone. The email came just as I was refilling my coffee. Subject line, opportunity at Devlin Systems. At first, I thought it was spam, another recruiter blast. But then I saw the name, Lawrence Devlin, founder and CTO of Devlin Systems, a company I'd followed quietly for years. The message was short, personal. Victor, I heard what happened at Veltria. We've always admired your work from afar. If you're open to a conversation, I'd love to talk. We're about to begin a major infrastructure rebuild, and we need someone who knows how to build things that don't break. I stared at the screen. Devlin Systems wasn't big, but they were sharp, nimble, the kind of company that didn't talk about disruption. They just quietly got things done. I replied, happy to chat. When and where? The next day. We met in a small cafe tucked behind an old bookstore in downtown Rochester. Lawrence was in his late 40s. Jeans and flannel. Eyes like someone who still read code at 2 a.m. He didn't waste time. We're scaling, he said. Fast. And what we have now, it's barely holding together. We've got patchwork systems, mismatched vendors, no documentation to speak of. I nodded. I'd seen that story before. I don't want something trendy, Lawrence added. I want something that'll still run when no one's looking. Something that can survive chaos. He leaned forward. I want you to build it. He blinked. From scratch, not kite. We'll salvage what we can. But yes, architecture. Data layers. Security. All yours. Full autonomy. Chief Systems Architect. Then he slid a napkin across the table, with numbers written in pen. Salary 20% above Veltria's. Full benefits. Equity. I looked up. Why me? Lawrence smiled. We already tried the cheaper route. Hired 3 young engineers. They built something that looked great, until we had 100 users. Then it died. He stirred his coffee. Then said it plainly, we don't need cheap. We need solid. I said yes. Quietly. No drama. No triumph. Just a clear, steady decision. Later that night, Elaine asked how it went. I told her everything. She smiled. Told you something would turn up. A week into my new role at Devlin Systems, I was deep into system architecture sketches, whiteboard filled. Diagrams halvfärdigt. Coffee gone cold when the phone rang again. Graham. Again. This time, I answered. His voice was different. Not the polished, rehearsed tone I remembered. It was thin. Worn down. Victor. We're in trouble. I didn't say anything. Westbrook Properties is threatening to terminate their contract. They say our systems are affecting tenant experience. Payment records are missing. Charges are inaccurate. Customer support can't keep up. I waited. Let the silence stretch. The consulting team we hired well. They've hit a wall. They say they can't make sense of your database structure. We need your insight. Please. I took a breath. I'm under contract now. Graham. Exclusive. I can't help you. He didn't hang up. We'll double what they're paying you. Just 2 days. We're desperate. It's not about the money. Pause. Then came the line I'd been expecting. Is this about revenge, about making us suffer? I let that hang in the air a moment. Then answered quietly, no. I don't enjoy seeing people struggle. But you made a business decision. You decided my experience wasn't worth the cost. Now, you're learning what that cost actually was. His voice dropped lower. The board wants to bring you back. Full salary. Signing bonus. Whatever it takes. For a moment, I felt something flicker. Not satisfaction. Just a soft pulse of, they see it now. But it passed. Going back wouldn't fix anything. The same people would be sitting at the same table, waiting for the next opportunity to cut corners. I appreciate the offer, Graham, but I've made a commitment. I build things right, from the ground up. That's what I'm doing now. And then his tone changed. Cold. Legal. You know, there could be implications. If it turns out you designed the system to be unmanageable, if it looks intentional, there are non-compete clauses. IP risks. There it was. I kept my voice steady. The system is exactly as it was when you refused to fund documentation. Every line of code belongs to Veltria. I've taken nothing but my experience. But if you'd like your lawyers to speak with mine, by all means, click. I sat there, phone still in hand, knuckles white. Not from fear. From anger I hadn't let myself feel until now. It was Alan who brought the truth. He showed up at my new office at Devlin Systems on a rainy Wednesday. Laptop bag slung over his shoulder. Water beading on his jacket. Got time for lunch, he asked. We ended up at a deli a few blocks away. Pastrami. Pickles. And the kind of silence that only old colleagues understand. Eventually, Alan opened his laptop. I found something. I looked at the screen. Email headers. Dozens of them. All internal. All between Graham and the Veltria board. He planned your termination months in advance. Alan said. Voice, low, despite the lunchtime crowd. He sold it to them like it was strategy. Told them your custom infrastructure was a liability. Said no one else could maintain it. So it had to go. I scrolled. There it was. Line after line of justification. Buzzwords and bullet points. And one sentence that stopped me cold. Hale's systems are unnecessarily complex. He's made himself indispensable by design, not necessity. I leaned back in my chair. That was the narrative. That I'd built something too hard to understand. That I'd done it on purpose. What they didn't mention was that I'd asked repeatedly for documentation resources, for training, for process manuals. What they didn't say was that I'd been told no. Every time. Alan wasn't done. The private equity firm that owns Veltria, they've been planning to sell for over a year. Graham was brought in for one reason, to make the company look lean and profitable on paper. Cutting legacy staff. Replacing infrastructure. Short-term gain. Suddenly, it all made sense. The rejection of every proposal. The rush toward standardization. The obsession with trimming costs. It had never been about improvement. It had been about appearance. Why are you showing me this? I asked quietly. Alan closed his laptop. Because I quit yesterday. And I'm not the only one. Half the IT department has walked out. Consultants are saying it could take 6 months or more to restore full functionality. I hesitated. And Westbrook Veltria's biggest client, they're looking for a way out. I felt it land. Hard. Westbrook made up almost a third of Veltria's revenue. Losing them wouldn't just hurt. It would cripple them. So what are you going to do? I asked. Alan smiled. Actually, I was hoping Devlin might be hiring a database administrator. The call came late in the afternoon. Lawrence had just stepped out of a meeting when he poked his head into my office. Victor, you've got a minute. I followed him down the hall into his corner office. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, catching the edge of whiteboards covered in system drafts. He shut the door. I just got off the phone with Jeffrey Westbrook, he said, his voice low but charged. They're terminating their contract with Veltria next month. I sat down slowly. They want to know if we can take their portfolio. I stared at him. Westbrook Properties managed over 10,000 units across the Northeast. Taking them on would double Devlin's current scale. It would also double the pressure. We're not ready, he admitted. The system is halfway built. We'd need senior engineers. Hardware. Time. His disparity. Lawrence said. He's willing to fund the infrastructure expansion, and he'll give us 12 weeks. I leaned forward. I'm already doing the math in my head. 3 more senior engineers. At least 5 more junior devs. Dedicated servers. 8 weeks of heavy lift. 4 weeks for QA and failover testing. It would be tight, but it was possible. That night, I didn't sleep. I sketched architectures until my wrist cramped. I mapped out migration timelines, risk charts, team responsibilities. At sunrise, I had a blueprint. The next morning, I handed it to Lawrence. He read through it carefully, then paused at one section. This documentation phase, it adds almost 3 weeks to the timeline. I nodded. It's non-negotiable. That's where Veltria failed. We document everything from day one. We train everyone. We don't build black boxes. Lawrence didn't argue. All right, let's move. The next 12 weeks were a storm. We hired 5 new engineers, 2 of them from Veltria. Alan came on board officially. I built modular systems, scalable layers, automated backups, and real-time redundancy maps. We wrote documentation as we coded, trained as we built. We did it right. Halfway through the project, I received an email from Justin Bayou. Victor, I owe you an apology. The board was misled. Graham is no longer with the company. We're struggling to recover. If you're ever open to returning, the door is open. I didn't respond. We were building something else now. Something that would last. 10 weeks into our 12-week build, we were ready. The first rollout would be Westbrook's smallest region too. 0 units in Western New York. If that went well, the rest would follow. The team was nervous but solid. The system had passed every load test, every failover simulation. Documentation was deep. Training had been rigorous. We were ready. The day before the migration, Lawrence called me into his office. Someone else was waiting. A tall man in a dark blazer stood as I entered. Hand extended. Jeffrey Westbrook, he said. I shook his hand. So, you're the one building this thing. Trying to. I replied with a smile. He glanced at Lawrence. He tells me you've built something that won't crash every time we add a new property. That's the goal. He nodded slowly, then looked at me with quiet curiosity. You used to work for Veltria. Didn't you? I did. They're in trouble. He didn't say it with malice. Just matter of fact. The private equity firm is trying to sell them off. But between us pulling out and their system still being unreliable, no one's biting. He paused. Except one company. I already knew the answer. Devlin. Lawrence nodded. We're considering an offer. It would be significantly below what they were worth. 6 months ago. I looked between them. Jeffrey continued. If that happens, we'd want someone to oversee the integration. Someone who understands both systems. Someone who can pull the useful pieces from Veltria's infrastructure and merge it into your new architecture. You're asking if I'd do it. Lawrence stepped in. Only if you're willing, and only if we acquire them. But if we do, you lead. I leaned back. The irony wasn't lost on me. The system I had built, the company that had cast me aside, all potentially returning, but this time under my terms. I thought for a moment, then nodded. I'd do it. But there's one condition. Name it. We do it right. No shortcuts. Full documentation. Real training. We build it like it's going to last forever. Lawrence smiled. We've learned that lesson. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't need to. I felt ready. I was packing up the last few things from my integration office when he knocked. Got a minute, Justin Bayou? It had been months since his last email, the one with the apology and the open door I never walked through. He looked more tired now, less polished, like someone who'd seen a storm up close. We stepped outside, into the small courtyard behind the building. The trees had just started to change. Leaves crackled under our feet. My father asked about you, Justin said, his voice softer than I remembered. He's retired now, living down in Florida, but he still reads all the updates. When he heard you were back, in a way, he was glad. I nodded, unsure what to say. He always said. Justin continued, that letting you go would be the biggest mistake the company could ever make. I looked away, not out of pride, just weariness. He was right. I stayed quiet. Justin sighed. I've learned a lot. Victor, about systems, about people, about what happens when you only look at the numbers and ignore the people who hold those numbers together. There was no bitterness in his voice, just reflection. I used to think value was easy to measure, that you could see it on a balance sheet. He paused. But sometimes, value doesn't show up until it's gone. We stood there for a while, just watching the trees sway in the wind. Then he said, I'm glad you're the one leading this now. I nodded again. Me too. 6 months later. I stood in the lobby of the building that used to carry the name Veltria Housing. Now, the sign above the front desk read, Devlin Integrated Property Management. The acquisition had gone through quietly, and at a fraction of Veltria's former value. The irony didn't escape anyone. Lawrence and I walked through the halls together. Some faces turned away. Some nodded in quiet recognition. A few smiled, the kind of smile you only give someone who survived what you did. Graham was long gone. So were most of the executives who once smiled while signing my severance papers. Justin had stayed on, just for the transition. A quiet bridge from what was to what could be. When we reached the server room, my old domain, Lawrence stopped. Want to go in? I looked through the glass. The blinking lights. The cables I'd once laid by hand. The last of the legacy. No need, I said. We're migrating everything soon. In the main conference room, the remaining staff had gathered. Lawrence stood at the front. Many of you already know Victor, he said. He built the systems that kept this company running for nearly 2 decades. Now he'll be leading the integration. Not just of data and code, but of culture. Of how we do things. I stepped forward. I didn't talk about the past. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't need to. I talked about the plan. About the rollout. About how no one would be left behind. The irony of those words after what had happened to me wasn't lost on anyone in the room. A year after the acquisition, Devlin Integrated Property Management became the largest property management firm in the Northeast. The migration completed on time. The new system, the one we built right, ran smoothly. Fully documented. Fully staffed. No more single points of failure. On a crisp October morning, Lawrence called me into his office. Board approved it, he said. You'll launch the technical education division next quarter. Full autonomy. Build it your way. That had been my only condition for staying on. Not more money. Not a fancier title. Just the chance to teach. To train the next generation of engineers, not just how to code, but how to think long-term. How to build systems meant to last. Later that day, I packed up my integration office. This time, the departure wasn't rushed. It wasn't bitter. It was earned. As I carried my things out, Justin stopped me near the exit. My father asked about you, he said again. He still remembers the old days. He said letting you go would be the biggest mistake the company ever made. He paused. Turns out he was right. I nodded. We didn't need to say more. On the drive home, I watched the leaves turn red and gold along Lake Ontario. The same lake I had stared into the day I lost everything. And now I wasn't thinking about what was lost. I was thinking about what would outlast me. I never needed revenge. I never needed them to fail. All I needed was the chance to build something better and let it speak for itself. If this story made you pause, if it reminded you of something that once mattered, then maybe you, like me, still believe that good work, done right, can outlast anything. At Voices Stories. That's what we keep. One like, one subscribe is more than enough to keep these stories alive.